Hi, lovely people. Welcome to this live session. I'm Dr. Sally Bell, and for those that don't know me, I have been using lifestyle and nutrition as well as conventional medicine to help people recover health for some years now. And this week I've been talking about dairy and my take on what I think of it in terms of a health. In terms of health, sorry, just let me get hold of the person that's joining us. Okay. Would be nice if my thing would work. So we do have somebody from the dairy industry joining us, but it is not working. I can't seem to get him to join. Brilliant. There we go. Thank you. Neil's going to be joining us. Anyway, just let me go back. So as I said, hi Neil, how are you?
Hi, Sally, thank you. I'm just relieved to be here in the first instance because I'm a bit of a newbie to Instagram Live, but let's hope this continues.
Yeah, great.
You hear me okay, can you?
People, yeah, I can hear you fine. You're breaking up a little bit, but we'll see how we go. I was just explaining to people that were joining this that I've been using lifestyle and nutrition and conventional medicine to help people recover their health for some years. And I've been writing about dairy this week, and it's provoked a lot of emotion from people. A lot of people very concerned about how dairy is produced and what have you. And I just want to say, like, from my perspective, like, I'm independent. People keep asking if I'm being sponsored by the dairy industry, and I'm not. I really don't mind whether people are vegan or paleo or omnivore or wherever they're coming from. For me, it's always about, eating real food. That's actually where we met, wasn't it, through the Real Food campaign. And certainly for me, a few years back, I started to think, gosh, I need to look further up the supply chain, really, because I hadn't realised how important it was how we produce our food. And it was a real eye-opener, just intensive farming on all levels, whether that was our grain or where our food was coming from or our meat or dairy. And so for me, I've been, visiting farms and trying to understand the story, not just sit and read research papers. Often, those are coming out of Northwest America and don't necessarily represent us in the UK. And so hence sort of wanted to bring you on just to bring a different perspective in terms of, talking about intensive farming, holding up our hands about how awful that has been, but hearing from your perspective, because you've come from that background, but then you've transitioned into a different sort of way of farming. And I'd love to just hear that and let other people hear just that side of the story. So Neil, do just, tell us, we met on the Real Food campaign, both passionate about real food.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your background, Neil. That would be lovely.
Okay. One second, I'm going to reach and shut a window. I've just got more noise coming in than I thought.
No problem. I can just keep talking, you know me.
I'm not running away. I'm back. So, hi to anybody who's listening in. I should say, actually, I kind of don't have a vested interest. I don't own a single cow. I don't own a single acre of land. I've spent my life historically running a lot of farm businesses. I grew up in Gloucestershire, where my mother's family still are dairy farmers today, and I've played my own furrow. Actually, I went off and worked elsewhere, and very much in dairy farming for a long period of time. And I ran a very big farm business. For 15 years, I ran a business that had 13 dairy herds producing 18 million litres of milk in the southwest of England. And I have to say, I was kind of always had an interest in business and industry and kind of the processes in industry that had achieved perceived efficiencies. And I spent quite a lot of my time thinking about how these might be applied to dairy farming. And to that end, I went off in 98, 99 and I was lucky to be awarded a Nuffield Farming Scholarship, which I used to go to the US and Australia to actually look at how dairy farmers could achieve economies of scale on farms, because I kind of knew how this worked on arable farms with big combine harvesters and people looking after thousands of acres. And I really did sort of think at one point this was the way forward. And just to keep this brief, fast forward to January 2000, when I took on running this large dairy business of 13 dairy herds. Amongst them were 3 herds of these funny fat red and white cows called Montbéliards from the Jura Mountains in France. And I had come from a high-yielding Holstein sort of background, and I couldn't work out why on earth a business would have these cows that gave less milk, and they just seemed to get big and fat and do very little. And it's totally inefficient to me. Then I was fortunate to go to France and look at them in their sort of home country, and producing wonderful cheeses like Reblochon, Comté, Mont d'Or, from almost exclusively from Montbéliard milk. And then I noticed back home that they were the cows that actually just did what cows do. We milked them, they got a reasonable yield of milk. They went outside, they grazed grass, they were very happy. They were fit, healthy, they very rarely got sick, they lasted a long time, they were very fertile, got back in calf easily. And as I said, it lent themselves to a much simpler system. And I hate to say I had an epiphany, but I kind of feel like I did to some extent, that they suddenly made me realize that those cows and that simple farming system were all about value rather than volume. And I'd spent so much of my working life with cows and dairy farming, chasing volume, producing more litres just to try and stay in business, milking more cows, pushing cows and people harder in a very high stressful regime. So there began my journey towards value, not volume, if you like. And since then I've done a number of things more in that kind of line, I guess. Yeah,
I think across agriculture, like, we're not here to point fingers. I think some are guilty, but all of us are responsible. And I think we as consumers want cheap food, and our farmers have tried to do that by focusing on yield. And there's a lot of stuff out there. There is documentaries about scary dairy that kind of represent these massive herds never having access to pasture. And historically, and I don't know, I'd love your perspective on this, shooting of male calves because they're no use. And I mean, intensive farming here in the UK with dairy, we do have that, don't we? That is the majority of where our milk in the supermarket's coming from. I mean, what's your insight in terms of where the industry is at the moment? Are we still killing male calves, and are cows still indoors? And it's good to have a proper conversation about this, so people understand what's going on. What's your perspective on that at the moment?
Well, in general terms, I would say that most dairy farms in the UK are still what people think of as a typical family farm. I think if you've got most people to just ask them to close their eyes and think of a British dairy farm, they'd be seeing a cow in the field somewhere. And it is now estimated, though, that something up to 20% of cows in the UK never go outside at the moment. That is, I think, increasing to a point, but I don't think it's the way the industry is going. And it's funny, this thing about intensive farms or even mega dairies or factory farms, there isn't a sort of point, and I don't even know if we have a proper definition of any of those, but there isn't a point at which you cross from one into the other that's very clear to see. It's kind of intensification by degrees, and so some people run a very low input system and a very simple system based on grazing cows for as much as they can. At the other extreme, you have people milking 2,000 cows plus, doing 12,000 litres of milk each 3 times a day on what I think of as a really industrial regime. That's the way I kind of like to describe it. So there are all things out there. And just on the bull calf thing, that actually has been a passion of mine for a long time. I sat on the Compassionate World Farming and RSPCA forum, Beyond Calf Exports forum, and we looked for a long time at solutions to this sort of killing of bull calves, partly driven in my mind because of that push for high yields in dairy cows. So we bred cows that were very good at producing milk, but they got taller and thinner, and so they kind of produced taller and thinner calves, which didn't lend themselves to the beef industry. And I had a real problem with that. And the Montbéliards again taught me this, because we had cows that produced good levels of milk, 7,000 litres of milk, but also this calf that has some real beefing qualities, and had real value in the marketplace. And I always felt it was very difficult to justify breeding something for which there was no market. And I hated hearing people on the television. I remember hearing Jim Doherty once on a television program, I think it was John Craven on Country Farm, sort of saying that male calves are a byproduct or a waste product of the dairy industry. And I was horrified to hear that, because they are not. It depends on how we breed them. And the numbers being killed have dropped dramatically. I'm afraid I can't give you current figures, but that work that was done in part through the Calf Export Forum led to some really good initiatives by things like some of the major retailers saying they would not allow their farmers to shoot male calves, and they provided rearing facilities. We've also seen the introduction of sex semen, which means now you can actually select semen from bulls and choose the right chromosomes such that you will get female calves and not male calves. So there's more selection going on in that respect. So all those things are helping, really. But we do live in a world where the continual demand for cheap food, and not necessarily from the public, but from those in the supply chain, i.e. the processors, the retailers, is still driving intensification in our farming.
Yeah, and I was really shocked when, a few years ago I started meeting dairy farmers and hearing their story. Like, one, they work so incredibly hard, but how little they get for their milk. And I mean, how much, on average at the moment does a farmer get for their milk?
Well, the prices have just gone up a penny or two in the last month or two. So some farms we back up now touching sort of 30 pence a litre, but we've seen these sort of wild fluctuations over the last, if you go back 2015, 16, some farms were getting 18 pence or less per litre for milk, where industry sort of analysts were quoting cost of production at 30p a litre. And it's this instability that is one of the biggest challenges to farmers, is we live in a very volatile world. That's being ironed out in some instances, again, by retailers now, some of them introducing what they call cost of production models. So they will pay farmers. They actually carry out, and they look at the figures from farms on a 6 monthly basis, and they look at what feed costs are, fuel costs, fertilizer costs, and all those sorts of things. And they come up with a sort of an average cost of production, and they pay farmers that plus a little bit. And so that introduces some stability. But the market is still very, very uncertain. And of course, costs in farming continue to rise. And it is a real problem right now, despite milk prices having recovered a little bit recently. Costs in feed and fuels and things are going up. So it's always, and this is again partly what has driven farmers to develop larger and some instances more intensive herds, is trying to find those cost savings all the time to stay in business. And unfortunately, farming has become, and not just dairy farming, but a lot of farming has become almost entirely output driven. So it's all about how we know we're carrying these costs. We've got to find more output to dilute those costs. And this is what I'm trying to do. And this is partly what led me and Carol Lever to set up Free Range Dairy Network, was that we wanted to establish value in the farming that delivers our milk. We want people to think more about the true value, because quite honestly, there is no such thing as cheap food. Somebody somewhere pays the real cost. And that can be the cows, that can be the farmers, it can be the environment. And it can be our own health too, So there are costs that are hidden that we don't see on them when we pick up milk on the shelf.
Yeah. And what do you see that as the solution going forward? I mean, what is happening? I've met some amazing, dairy farmers, and COVID stopped me in my tracks rudely from visiting farms, hoping to pick that up again. But here in the UK, we are really lucky, aren't we? Like, the majority, the backbone of our farming community is still small family farms, and there are other options where milk is being produced in sort of in more sort of harmony with nature. I mean, what's your experience and what's going on? And I'd love to hear your perspective on that for us as consumers. How do we connect with that as well?
Well, I think you sort of mentioned something right at the start then about the fact you've been visiting farms and connecting with farmers. And that, to me, is absolutely key in all of this, in bringing about not just a kind of better future for farmers, but for all of us, for whether, again, it be for the cows, for the planet, for our own health. It's that connection thing that's absolutely vital. And that's what I spend most of my time trying to do, is connect people with the farmers and the cows and the landscape that produces their food, because that level of understanding will change things. And I think we are on the cusp of a bit of a revolution right now, in part driven by COVID and lockdown. So we've had people who couldn't find food on the supermarket shelves, so they've gone to local farm shops or even gone to farms. Particularly, I love the kind of whole story about the milk vending machines in particular, where people have suddenly sort of realised there's no milk in the local supermarket, but that farm down the road keeps saying they sell their own milk, and they get and that's really that is leading in dairy, particularly, I think, a real change, because what people are discovering is proper milk. So they're getting back to tasting milk that's probably less than 24 hours old when they buy it. They're getting back to milk that's just been very gently pasteurized. It's not homogenized. It's been totally unmessed with. It's not standardized, other than pasteurizing. And they are comparing that then to what they've been buying in the supermarket and thinking, well, this is kind of an entirely different product. And it's just brilliant. I mean, the taste alone, never mind all the other good things about it, but the taste alone, people are enjoying so much. And I think that the milk, I say this to people, maybe it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think the milk vending machine will go down in history as being a weapon that started the revolution of British dairy farming, because it's also, what it's doing is it's giving the farmer, that primary producer who for so long was kind of confined to the role of mass commodity producer back there somewhere in the background, is putting him right in front of the customer, which is good for the farmer in that respect, but also he is learning to communicate. He's learning to market his goods. He's learning to sort of think, gets him thinking about, these people like what I do, but one or two are asking questions about this, and what am I doing about, the environment? What am I doing about fertilizer use on my farms? If that's what they want, and I've got an opportunity to sell that direct to them and add value to my product, then that's what I'm going to do. And that whole piece of the jigsaw has been missing for so long.
And I think as a consumer, for my part as well, with all the farms I've visited, whether that's grain, whether that's dairy, whether that's market garden, one, it's completely changed my perspective and value of food. I never, ashamedly, probably for many years, never saw beyond the supermarket, and because of that, it's cheap, and if it went off, I'd throw it away. And actually getting back to the farm gate has revolutionized the way I value food regardless, and it's also really revolutionized my value of the grower. And so I think it changes, it's just the most powerful way to change our use of food. And so I think it's both ways. The farmer, they go from producing commodity to being food producers, and that changes their story, but it changes our experience of it too. Now, as a consumer, if I'm going to my farm gate, what are some of the questions that's important in terms of how cows are being looked after and what they're being fed, and in terms of the impact on the environment? What are the key questions? Is it, would you feed them? Do they have access to pasture? What are the questions that help us as consumers know what's going on?
Yeah, I think hopefully a lot of this will be answered by what you see when you arrive at the farm in many respects. So very often you'll see the cows being grazed in the fields. You maybe even see them coming past for milking. Many of us know, when we have signs of illness or sickness in our pets, things in dairy cows, like lameness, like cows being in really poor condition, extremely skinny, or whatever it is. Same thing we might see in our dogs and cats or whatever. So it's kind of very easy for us to make an assessment for ourselves, even before you get to ask any questions. But the one thing I often think is actually, and it's perhaps something we come on to, is we have a plethora of assurance schemes, farm assurance schemes, that have been introduced to try and sort of make sure that the purchasers in supermarkets and more distant destinations
what are those labels that people can look for that you think actually are not just tick box exercises, but actually present good standards? What are they that we're looking for?
It's hard. There are certain labels that define certain things. So it's hard to say there's one label that absolutely gives you everything. Red Tractor gets a lot of knocks. Farmers are accused of sort of being unable to fail a Red Tractor sort of audit and things. That's not true. That's not true. They will, for instance, they will come out, and if they do an audit on your farm and there's some things not right, you're given a certain time frame within which to remedy those things, or you'll be struck from the system or suspended until such point they're done. and you could ultimately be suspended from that. But Red Tractor puts a baseline in everything. It's really important in my mind. It is. I'm very pro Red Tractor. It may not be all things to all men, but it gives a very good baseline from which to work from. Other schemes then sort of go on from that. So whether you look at organic accreditation, which is telling you just that, really, there's a very in-depth set of standards for organic farming around all sorts of things. It's not just about trying to sort of minimize pesticides and fertilizers. It's actually there's a lot more in it than that. So I haven't really got time to go through all that. The Pasture for Life from the Pasture Fed Livestock Association is a clear assurance that cattle are fed 100% grass pasture-based diets. There's no grain in those diets. I myself run Free Range Dairy Network. We are all about in that cows grazing for a minimum of 6 months a year. We want people to be assured when they buy milk it only comes from cows grazed for that long. We use Red Tractor in that as a basis for our overarching farm assurance. I'm trying to think, I'm going to upset somebody, I'm missing somebody off, but those are kind of the sort of the main ones that you'll see around at the moment. But there are talks now about all sorts of sustainability metrics, and Marks and Spencers, I believe, are going to trial some new labeling with almost a traffic light system for sustainability this autumn. How reliable that'll be, how confusing it will be, we're yet to see.
And so you just tell me a little bit, because one of the things I've loved about one of the initiatives you're doing is your Produce and Provide UK. I mean, one of my passions is, I've gone and visited the farms. It's, gosh, how do I connect my people who are following me and want to make good decisions around, their health and, supporting good, sustainable farming. And actually you have a forum where you're connecting those people together. Just tell me a little bit about that. I mean, you're always out. Every time I look at your profile, you visited another farm, and it's been really exciting to see.
Yes,
tell me a little bit about that to help people.
Yeah, I started Produce and Provide because I've felt in all my experience. So I through my free range dairy work, I work with farmers who are, say, vending machines selling milk at the farm gate. We work with small dairy companies. We've got milk into a major retailer through that. So I've followed milk particularly from I grew up milking cows working on farms, and I've actually now been in offices and talked to major retailers, and they've stocked a product which I've kind of come up with the concept for and everything else. So. And I've realized, what it's really made me realize is how powerless farmers are in influencing the value of their product. And we were always told as farmers, don't worry about the price of milk, for instance. You can't influence the price of milk. You concentrate on cutting costs. You concentrate on costs, manage your costs. That's what you should do. And that's how you run a successful dairy farming business. And there is an element of truth in that still today. But I think the biggest thing that drove me to set up Produce and Provide was the fact that farmers, and particularly when you look at individual farmers doing different things, it's quite hard when you have a big pool of farmers, because you could have 1,000 farmers producing milk that all ends up in a vast vat, and it's put into bottles and goes off, and nobody has a clue where it came from or how it's produced. So Produce and Provide is about helping farmers to really grasp the value in their product by encouraging them to sell product direct at the farm gate and promoting those that do. So we work with the website. There's a map where you can actually find local producers of all sorts of things near you. I'm also working with producers who are registering with us now to create a profile a bit more about their business, and actually you can search for specific products, whether that's beef or whether it's chicken or whether it's vegetables. But for me, all the time, it's about the story, about the farming behind it, and it's giving farmers a chance to identify the things that they do as individuals that will add value to customers. And I think we have a curious population now. People are asking, well, if you look at the news, climate change, animal welfare, all these things are questions for farmers and things that farmers can influence. And I've always felt passionate about farmers taking hold of these issues themselves rather than allowing someone else to say, don't worry, we're going to label this, we're going to rubber stamp some things, and we're going to make farmers do these things. Let's actually take the initiative and do it. And that's what Produce and Provide is all about, is promoting farmers and actually dragging them out of that horrible mire that I was in for so long of being a commodity producer and just coming under more and more pressure to produce more for less. Let's talk about the value, not the volume, as I keep saying.
And so just for those that are watching, so you can find Produce and Provide. It's Produce and Provide UK.
Sorry, the website is .co.uk.
Yeah, and just to recap, so I love it because what you do is you go on and you pop in your postcode and all these little producers pop up on a map where you live. And it might be that you can find a milk shed, it might be, you know, market vegetables, it might be, you've even got things like jams and honey, and as well as your beef. And it's just giving us as consumers the power to make contact directly. I mean, one of the things I found, people go, oh, so inconvenient, like just, you know, go to the supermarket, it's all done. And initially there is a bit of inconvenience about finding your your producers. But once you've done that, it's probably easier actually, because a lot of them are delivering online, and so I have particularly meat producers and dairy. I mean, I'm very lucky. We have the most wonderful milk shed near us, near my daughter's school, where I'll get milk from. But even, you know, market vegetables, once I've kind of made the connections, which is actually it's fun finding them and learning for yourself instead of somebody else doing your thinking for you. You know, it's not inconvenient. You know, once you've located who they are and made that connection and that relationship, you know, you just, you know, we always order the same thing as a nation, don't we, every week? It's just,
that's right.
And it's a wonderful resource that to help connect people with wonderful producers and hear the stories. I think story changes us, and I'm so tired of, you know, these kind of journalists putting their Netflix documentaries, worst case scenario, and it's different in every location, every country. And I think we need to be responsible, you know, to find out for ourselves and and recover a love for food and a respect for food. You know, I always think food is one of the most ethical acts that we ever do. You know, it says, what do I value about myself? What do I value about my environment? You know, what do I value for the future children, you know, in terms of the next generation? And like you say, you know, the true cost, you know, cheap food comes with a cost somewhere, whether that's to the farmer, the environment, the cow, our health. And so it's worth like investing, I think, in good food.
Well, and also it's countering the misinformation that's out there at the moment. I mean, you take the general sweeping statements about cows and climate change, for instance. You know,
I know.
There are some wonderful, you know, some really good bits of work going on farms and with other organisations to demonstrate, you know, it's in that particular sphere, whether it's beef or dairy products, it's not the cow, it's the how. So cows live. Given a sort of life in a field, a cow lives in a perfectly natural cycle with carbon. You know, the simple thing of atmospheric carbon is actually sort of used in photosynthesis to grow green plant material that the cow then fertilizes with dung, and then that's recycled back up through her emissions. And you know, it's the farming system. It's all about the use of fossil fuels in farming. That's where the emissions are really coming from, the additional. And farmers, it's amazing. And this is what I love about what I do, is I'm meeting some inspirational people who are really thinking outside the box. I went on a farm walk actually in the Chew Valley this week with a young chap who is started a very small suckler herd of cows, and he's gone into what they refer to precision grazing, and it's very intensively grazing cows on confined areas for a short period, literally for a day, and then moving on to the next block, and huge sort of recovery periods for the grass. And he's got a big aftermath of matted grass, and we were learning about how that is increasing biodiversity on the farm, and we were surrounded by insects that day. But also, it's because it's over Chew Valley Lake, which is part of Bristol's water supply. Bristol Water were there talking about how the way he was leaving his grass was actually helping water to infiltrate and trap water on that hillside, rather than getting all this runoff and flooding down below or running into the lake. There's just a whole load of stuff. Farming is in a really potentially a very difficult time right now. We've just done a really stupid trade deal with Australia to allow its stuff in that's would even from farms where practices would be banned in the UK. We are literally selling us, or in danger of selling our soul, and selling out all our food security and sovereignty at the moment. And farmers are understandably really concerned. There's a lot of uncertainty about farm support going forward from government. But I do think a lot of us, and certainly the people I'm seeing on Produce and Provide, are learning where the changes are going to take us and thinking about how they can deliver solutions, not just in terms of the food they can produce, but the benefits for environment, for wildlife, for human health, for so many things that farms can deliver. And I think getting out onto farms, if I say to everybody, if you would just make sure you committed to buying one thing in your grocery basket direct from a farm, you know, whether that's a bottle of milk or whether it's a, you know, your vegetable box, or just do something, because it's a chain of events really, which we can all play a part in.
Just fantastic. And thanks so much, Neil, for sharing your experience. And I think it is a very, you know, I know it's a daunting time, but it's an exciting time as well, where I think as consumers, we have the opportunity to start doing some thinking for ourselves and realizing that the way we're currently consuming, you know, isn't sustainable, and an opportunity, you know, here in the UK to get behind some incredible producers. And that's just one of my passions, is connecting people with that back to their food. And so thanks, you know, for your wisdom. Thanks for the work you're doing. People can follow you on Instagram. I mean, what I love about following Neil's Instagram is, you know, you constantly get an introduction to all these wonderful stories and his visits onto the farms. And again, you know, for many people, they can't go to a farm, you know, but we can through Instagram. We can, and so it is a lovely way to start thinking and considering and hearing some other stories and educating ourselves that, you know, there are other stories, not just some of this propaganda that's kind of put out about how awful it is. We have some wonderful solutions to that. Not to say that some of that stuff isn't true. It's just there are other solutions that we need to explore. So But anyway, thank you, Neil, for your time. Really appreciate it, and we'll catch up again soon. So best wishes in all you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And and hopefully see you again soon. Bye.
Thank you, Sally. Bye-bye.